So I am just going to read some stories. Once, the Buddha was born as a Banyan deer. When he was grown, he became leader of the herd. He guided his herd wisely and led them to the heart of a secluded forest where, sheltered by the giant trees, they lived free from danger. Then a new king came into power over the land, and above all things, this king loved hunting. As soon as the sun rose, he would mount his horse and lead his men on a furious chase through the fields and meadows, forests and glens. Shooting his arrows madly, he would not leave off until the sun had set. Then the wagons rolled back to the palace behind him, filled now with deer, boar, rabbit, pheasant, monkey, leopard, bear, tiger, and lion, and the king was happy. His people, however, were not pleased. Fields had been ruined by the royal hunt. Farmers and merchants had been forced to leave off their work in order to beat the jungles and drive the hidden beasts toward the waiting king and his men. Affairs of state, too, lay unattended. The people, determined to bring all this to an end, devised a simple plan. They built a stockade deep in the forest. "We'll trap a herd or two of deer in the stockade," they said. "Then the king can hunt all he wants. Let him hunt to his heart's content. He won't ruin our fields or force us to leave our shops. Then let him be happy." The stockade was built and 2 herds of deer were driven within its walls. The gates were closed, and the delicate animals, charging and wheeling in frantic circles, sought some way out. But there was none. Exhausted at last, they stood trembling, awaiting their fate. The men left happily to tell the king of their success. One of the herds that had been captured was the herd of the Banyan deer. The Banyan deer walked among its herd. Sunlight played on his many-branched antlers. His black eyes shone and his muzzle was wet. "The blue sky is overhead. Green grass grows at our feet," he told the others. "Do not give up. Where there is life, there is hope. I will find a way." And so he strove to ease their fears. Soon the king arrived to view the newly captured herds. He was pleased. He strung his bow in preparation for the hunt. Noticing the 2 deer kings below, he said, "The leaders of both herds are magnificent animals. No one is to shoot them. They shall be spared." Then, standing on the wall, looking down over the stockade, he sent his arrows flying into the milling herds. The deer became frantic. Racing wildly, they injured one another with horns and hooves as they sought to escape the deadly rain of arrows. And so it went. Every few days the king and his courtiers would return to the stockade, and every few days more of the gentle deer were killed. Many others were wounded by the flying arrows. Still others were injured by the effort to escape. The king of the Banyan deer met with the leader of the other herd. "Brother," he said, shaking his antlered head sadly, "we are trapped. I've tried every way, but all are barred against us. The pain our subjects suffer is unbearable. As you know, when the arrows fly, many get badly hurt just trying to stay alive. Let us hold a lottery. Each day all the deer 1 day from your herd, 1 day from mine, must pick a straw. Then one single deer on whom the lottery falls will go stand near the wall just below the king. That one deer must offer itself to be shot. It is a terrible solution, but at least this way we can keep many from needless injury and pain. And the leader of the other herd agreed. The next day, when the king and his courtiers arrived, they found one trembling deer standing directly below them. Its legs and body were shaking, but it held its head high. "What's this?" said the king. "Ah, I see. These are noble deer indeed. They have chosen that one deer alone shall die, rather than they should all suffer from our hunt. Those deer kings have wisdom." A heaviness descended on the king's heart. "We will accept their terms," he announced. "From now on, shoot only the one deer that stands below." And unstringing his bow, he descended from the stockade wall and rode back in silence to the palace. That night the king tossed and turned, a radiant deer pacing through his dreams. One day the lot fell on a pregnant doe. She went to her king, the leader of the other herd, and said, "I will willingly go and fulfill the lottery once my fawn is safely born. But if I go now, both I and my unborn child will die. Please spare me for now. I do not ask for myself, but for the sake of the child that is soon to be born." But the leader of that herd said, "The law is the law. I cannot spare you. The lottery has fallen on you, and you must die. There are no exceptions. Justice demands that you go." In desperation, she ran to the banyan deer. She fell on her knees before him and begged for his aid. He listened quietly, observing her with wide and gentle eyes. "Rise, sister," said the banyan deer, "and go free. You are right. The terms of the lottery require that only one need die. Therefore, you shall be freed from the lottery until your fawn is born. I will see that it is so done." Too overjoyed for words, the grateful doe bowed and then bounded away. The banyan deer king rose to his feet. There was no other he could send to take her place. He had spared her, therefore he himself must replace her. How could it be otherwise? He walked calmly, with great dignity, through his browsing herd. They watched him as he moved among them. His great, curving antlers and strong shoulders, his shining eyes and sharp black hooves, all reassured and comforted them. Never had their banyan deer king let them down. Never had he abandoned them. If there was a way, he would find it. If there was a chance to save another, he would take it. Not once had he lorded it over them. He was a king indeed, and his whole herd took comfort in his presence. The courtiers were waiting with bows drawn atop the stockade. When they saw it was the deer king who had come to stand below, they called out, "O king of the banyan deer, you know our king has spared you. Why are you here?" "I have come so that 2 others need not die. Now shoot. You have your work, and I have mine." But, lowering their bows, they sent a message to the king. "Your Majesty, come with all speed to the stockade." Not long after, the king arrived, riding like the wind, with his robes streaming behind him. "What is it?" he called. "Why have you summoned me?" "Come, your Majesty," the men called. "Look." Dismounting from his horse, the king hurried up the rough wooden steps and looked down over the wall. The Banyan deer stood below. Then Deer King and Human King looked at one another. "Banyan King," said the King of Men at last, "I know you. I have seen you gliding through the forests of my dreams. Why are you here? Have I not freed you from my hunt?" "Great King," replied the Banyan deer, "what ruler can be free if the people suffer? Today a doe with fawn asked for my aid. The lottery had fallen on her, and both she and her unborn fawn were to die. The lottery requires that only one shall die. I shall be that one. I shall take her place. The lottery shall be fulfilled. This is my right and my duty as a king." A stone rolled from the king's heart. "Noble Banyan deer," he said, "you are right. A king should care for the least of his subjects. It is a lesson I have been long in the learning, but today, through your sacrifice, you have made it clear to me. So I shall give you a gift, a teacher's fee for the lesson you have taught me. You and your whole herd are freed. None of you shall be hunted again. Go and live in peace." But the Banyan deer said, "Great King, that is indeed a noble gift, but I cannot leave yet. May I speak further?" "Speak on, noble deer." "O King of Men, if I depart to safety with my own herd, will that not mean that the remaining herd shall simply suffer all the more? Each day you shall kill only them. They will have no respite. A rain of arrows will fall upon them. While I desire above all things the safety of my people, I cannot buy it at the cost of increasing the suffering of others. Do you understand?" The Human King was stunned. "What?" he exclaimed. "Would you then risk your own and your herd's freedom for others?" "Yes," said the Banyan deer, "I would. I will." "Think of their anguish, Great King. Imagine their sufferings, and then let them, too, go free." The King of Men paused, and he pondered. At last he lifted his head and smiled. "Never have I seen such nobility or such resolute concern. How can I refuse you? You shall have your wish. The other herd, too, shall go free. Now, can you go off with your own herd and be at peace?" But the Banyan deer answered, "No, Great King, I cannot. I think of all the other wild, four-footed creatures. Like them, I have lived my life surrounded by dangers and by fears. How could I live in peace, knowing the terrors they must endure? I beg you, mighty king, have pity on them. There can be no peace unless they too are free." The King of Men was again astonished. He had never imagined such a thing. He thought, and slowly the truth of the Banyan deer's words grew clear to him. It was true, he realized. There is no real peace unless its benefits extend to all. "You are right, Great Deer," said the King of Men at last. "Never again in all my realm shall any four-footed creature be slain. They are all freed from my hunt. Rabbit, boar, bear, lion, leopard, tiger, deer, all. Never again shall they fall to my huntsman's arrows. So, my teacher, have you now found peace?" But the Banyan deer said, "No, Great King, I have not. What, my lord of the defenseless ones of the air? The birds, Great King, live surrounded by a net of danger. Stones and arrows shall greet them now wherever they fly. They shall fall from the skies like a rain throughout your kingdom. They shall know such suffering as can hardly be imagined. O Great King, I beg you, let them go free. Release them also." "Great One," said the King of Men, You drive a hard bargain, and are determined, it seems, to make farmers of us all. But yes, I shall free the birds. They may now fly freely throughout my realm. No man shall hunt them again. Then may they build their nests in peace. Now are you satisfied? Are you at last at peace? Great king, answered the Banyan deer, think if you will of the silent ones of your realm, the fish, my lord. If I do not now speak for them, who will? While they swim the lakes, rivers, and streams of your land, hooks, nets, and spears will be ever poised above them. How can I have peace while they abide in such danger? Great king, I beg you, spare them as well. Noble being, said the king of men, tears trickling down his cheeks, compassionate one, never before have I been moved to think in such a new way, but yes, I do so agree. The fish, too, are of my kingdom, and they too shall be free. They shall swim throughout my land, and no one shall kill them again. Now, all of you assembled courtiers and attendants, announced the king, hear my words. This is my proclamation. See that it is posted throughout the land. From this day forth, all beings in my realm shall be recognized as my own dear subjects. None shall be trapped, hunted, or killed. This is my lasting decree. See to it that it is fulfilled. Now tell me, noble one, he said, turning to the Banyan deer once more, are you at peace? Flocks of birds flew overhead and perched, singing from among the nearby trees. Deer grazed calmly on the green grass. Yes, said the Banyan deer, now I am at peace. And he leapt up, kicking like a fawn. He leapt for joy, sheer joy. He had saved them all. Then he thanked the king, and, gathering his herd, departed with his herd back into the depths of the forest. The king had a stone pillar set on the spot where he had spoken with the Banyan deer. Carved upon it was the figure of a deer encircled with these words, homage to the noble Banyan deer, compassionate teacher of kings. Then he too lived on, caring wisely for all things. There is no author for this. It is an early Buddhist story. I'm 92 years old, all right. I get up every morning at 7 a.m. Each day I remind myself, wake up, get up. I talk to my legs. Legs, get moving. Legs, you're an antelope. It's a matter of mind over matter. You have to have the right spirit. And I'm out on the streets, 7:30 a.m. sharp. I'm wearing my Honorable Sanitation Commissioner badge they gave me from City Hall. I'm alert, I'm ready, I'm out there, and I've got my whistle. My job is I help get parked cars off the street so they can bring in the sanitation trucks. And the Wayne broom, the big one, 30 grand for a broom. So when they show up, I go around blowing my whistle to get people to move their cars. I have a great time. People are asleep. They're busy with businesses. They're busy taking time off from the businesses. They're busy having a good time. They're busy not having a good time. Whatever, I don't care. I blow my whistle. I'm all over the place. I don't discriminate either. I go after the sanitation men too. The union got them a coffee break. Some coffee. They're having eggs, they're having bacon, they're having toast, they're having French toast. I kid them about it. And I go right into the restaurant and blow my whistle. They love it. They understand. Everybody loves it. Everybody understands. It's the whistle that gets them. Sometimes I'm having such a laugh, I can't blow it. Then I get back to work. Schleppers, get moving. Let's go. This used to be a beautiful city. People cared. If you didn't pay your rent, the sheriff would come and put your furniture out on the street. But the poorest of the poor would come automatically and drop their pennies and nickels at your house and put you back into your apartment. That's neighborhood. Now it's different. Things have gotten out of kilter. Hard to say why. People seem to be lost in their own lives. I see them on the street, lost in their own thoughts. Not that I'm all that different. I'm a schlep myself. I have as many bad habits as anyone. You should see my apartment. It's a mess. Me, Mr. Clean. But I'm trying. Let's try. It's all possible. What can I tell you? I'm not a saint or a wise man. I'm not the 2,000-year-old man. I'm only the 92-year-old man, just a senior citizen. But what do I know that everybody else doesn't know? We know. I just go out there in the morning and blow my whistle. That's what I do. You do what you do. Me, I'm having a great time. Wonderful fun. And when people see how much fun I'm having, they have to laugh. What else can they do? Then I hit them with it. Move your car. I like that. A young man who had a bitter disappointment in life went to a remote monastery and said to the abbot, I am disillusioned with life and wish to attain enlightenment, to be freed from these sufferings. But I have no capacity for sticking long at anything. I could never do long years of meditation and study and austerity. I should relapse and be drawn back to the world again, painful though I know it to be. Is there any short way for people like me? There is, said the abbot. If you are really determined, tell me, what have you studied? What have you concentrated on most in your life? Why, nothing really. We were rich, and I did not have to work. I suppose the thing I was really interested in was chess. I spent most of my time at that. The abbot thought for a moment, and then said to his attendant, Call such and such a monk, and tell him to bring a chessboard and men. The monk came with the board, and the abbot set up the men. He sent for a sword, and showed it to the two. O monk, he said, you have vowed obedience to me as your abbot, and now I require it of you. You will play a game of chess with this youth, and if you lose, I shall cut off your head with this sword. But I promise that you will be reborn in paradise. If you win, I shall cut off the head of this man. Chess is the only thing he has ever tried hard at, and if he loses, he deserves to lose his head also. They looked at the abbot's face and saw that he meant it. He would cut off the head of the loser. They began to play. With the opening moves, the youth felt the sweat trickling down to his heels as he played for his life. The chessboard became the whole world. He was entirely concentrated on it. At first, he had somewhat the worst of it, but then the other made an inferior move, and he seized his chance to launch a strong attack. As his opponent's position crumbled, he looked covertly at him. He saw a face of intelligence and sincerity, worn with years of austerity and effort. He thought of his own worthless life, and a wave of compassion came over him. He deliberately made a blunder, and then another blunder, ruining his position and leaving himself defenseless. The abbot suddenly leaned forward and upset the board. The two contestants sat stupefied. There is no winner and no loser, said the abbot slowly. There is no head to fall here. Only two things are required. And he turned to the young man. Complete concentration and compassion. You have today learned them both. You were completely concentrated on the game, But then, in that concentration, you could feel compassion and sacrifice your life for it. Now stay here a few months and pursue our training in this spirit, and your enlightenment is sure. He did so and got it. Again, there's no author, it just says Zen as the source. This is a story told of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. After praising her extraordinary work, an interviewer for the BBC remarked that in some ways, service might be a bit easier for Mother Teresa than for us, ordinary householders. After all, she had no possessions, no car, no insurance, and no husband. "This is not true," she replied at once. "I am married too." She held up the ring that nuns in her order wear to symbolize their wedding to Christ. Then she added, "And he can be very difficult sometimes." That was very short. Okay. This is a Sufi story. In the spiritual community that G.I. Gurdjieff led in France, an old man lived there who was the personification of difficulty. Irritable, messy, fighting with everyone, and unwilling to clean up or help at all. No one got along with him. Finally, after many frustrating months of trying to stay with the group, the old man left for Paris. Gurdjieff followed him and tried to convince him to return, but it had been too hard, and the man said no. At last, Gurdjieff offered the man a very big monthly stipend if he returned. How could he refuse? When he returned, everyone was aghast, and on hearing that he was being paid while they were being charged a lot to be there, the community was up in arms. Gurdjieff called them together, and after hearing their complaints, laughed and explained. "This man is like yeast for bread," he said. "Without him, here, you would never really learn about anger, irritability, patience, and compassion. That is why you pay me, and why I hire him." That's Sufi. A Zen master was invited to a great Catholic monastery to give instructions in Zen practice. He exhorted the monks there to meditate and try to solve their koan or Zen question with great energy and zeal. He told them that if they could practice with full-hearted effort, true understanding would come to them. One old monk raised his hand. "Master," he said, "our way of prayer is different than his. We have been meditating and praying in the simplest fashion without effort, waiting instead to be illuminated by the grace of God. In Zen, is there anything like this illuminating grace that comes to one uninvited?" he asked. The Zen master looked back and laughed. "In Zen," he said, "we believe that God has already done his share." Okay. A modern master described how the Buddha had encouraged his monks by stating that those who practiced diligently would surely be enlightened in 7 days, or, if not in 7 days, then in 7 months or 7 years. A young American monk heard this and asked if it was still true. The master, Akanka, I hope I'm saying that right, promised that if the young monk was continuously mindful without break for only 7 days, he would be enlightened. Excitedly, the young monk started his 7 days, only to be lost in forgetfulness 10 minutes later. Coming back to himself, he again started his 7 days, only to become lost once more in mindless thought, perhaps about what he would do after his enlightenment. Again and again he began his 7 days, and again he lost his continuity of mindfulness. A week later, he was not enlightened, but had become very much aware of his habitual fantasies and wandering of mind, a most instructive way to begin his practice on the path to real awakening. That is a Buddhist story. A Hasid complained to Rabbi Wolf that certain persons were turning night into day, playing cards. "That is good," said the Zadik. "Like all people, they want to serve God and don't know how, but now they are learning to stay awake and persist in doing something. When they have become perfect in this, all they need to do is turn to God, and what excellent servants they will make for him then." That is Chassid, and I don't know who that is, but I'm presuming it's maybe a poet or some type of, well, obviously an author. The whole family went out to dinner one evening. Menus were passed to all, including Molly, the 8-year-old daughter. The conversation was an adult one, so Molly sat ignored. When the waiter took orders, he came to Molly last. "And what do you want?" he asked. "A hot dog and a soda," she said. "No," said her grandmother. "She'll have the roast chicken dinner, carrots, and mashed potatoes." "And milk to drink," chimed in the father. "Would you like ketchup or mustard on your hot dog?" asked the waiter as he walked away, taking the parents aback. "Ketchup," she called out. She then turned to her family and added, "You know what? He thinks I'm real." Oh, that's so cute. That's a contemporary story. Oh, there are different themes. I'm glad you like the stories. Awesome. When we are willing to rest with trust on this earth, the great force of life will begin to move through us. I saw this force of life in the midst of tremendous desolation some years ago in the dry and barren land of the Cambodian refugee camps, which I had visited to assist the refugees. After the Cambodian Holocaust, only parts of families had survived: a mother and 3 children, an old uncle and 2 nephews, and each was given a little bamboo hut about 4 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 5 feet high. In front of each hut was a little patch of land, perhaps no bigger than 1 square yard. After only a few months of camp life, next to most of the huts, in their little squares of ground, people had planted gardens. They would have a squash plant with 2 or 3 small squash on it, or a bean plant, or some other vegetable. The plants were very carefully tended, with little bamboo stakes for support. The tendrils of a bean plant would wind around the stake, up and over the roof of the house. Every day, each refugee family would walk a mile and stand for half an hour in a long line at the pit well at the far end of the camp and carry back a bucket of water for their plants. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing to see these gardens in the middle of this camp in the dry season, when you could barely believe that anything would grow on such a hot, barren field. As these war-shattered families planted and watered their tiny gardens, They awakened the unstoppable force of life. So can we. No matter what inner difficulty or outer suffering we may experience, in tending to the darkness with compassion, we will discover this same unstoppable life force. That's a Buddhist story. I really hope I'm getting the pronunciation of these names correct. Mullah Nasruddin decided to start a flower garden. He prepared the soil and planted the seeds of many beautiful flowers. But when they came up, his garden was filled not just with his chosen flowers, but also overrun by dandelions. He sought out advice from gardeners all over and tried every method known to get rid of them, but to no avail. Finally, he walked all the way to the capital to speak to the royal gardener at the sheik's palace. The wise old man had counseled many gardeners before and suggested a variety of remedies to expel the dandelions, but Mullah had tried them all. They sat together in silence for some time, and finally the gardener looked at Nasruddin and said, "Well, I suggest you learn to love them." That is Sufi. Right? A single mother I admire told me how she struggled for years to raise her 4 children alone, with little money and no free time. It seems she was doing all she could do. Then, quite unself-consciously, the energy of the great mother of compassion filled her when her youngest daughter at 14 was paralyzed as a result of an accident. Her daughter couldn't speak or move. The doctors at the hospital said they didn't think there was much chance for her to ever move again. Yet her mother knew that her daughter was still conscious inside. As mothers do, she felt deep in her being that her daughter could be rehabilitated. The mother moved into the hospital room and began working with her daughter. She spent a year in the hospital, and 2 years after that at home almost every day with her daughter, just picking up the girl's hand, putting it down, picking it up, and putting it down, moving something in front of her eyes, back and forth, day after day, until her daughter's hands and eyes began to move again. After 3 years, the girl was well enough to return to school. Now full grown, she has finished law school and is about to be married. Such generosity cannot be forced. It moves through us when we are deeply connected and deeply empty. Such compassion moves through us as a grace, bringing together a tenderness and fearlessness that could never come by any other means. That is a contemporary author, no name. A brother asked Abba Matos, "What shall I do? My tongue causes me trouble, and whenever I am among people, I cannot control it, and I condemn them in all their good deeds and contradict them. What, therefore, shall I do?" The old man answered him, "If you cannot control yourself, go away from people and live alone, for this is a weakness. Those who live together with others ought not to be square but round, in order to turn toward all." Further, the old man said, "I live alone, not because of my virtue, but rather because of my weakness. You see, those who live among people are the strong ones." The author's Desert Fathers